Welcome to Talkenomics. I'm Adam Shapiro. Thank you for joining us live. We are streaming on X, on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on Rumble, and on YouTube. And we're talking about media, legacy media. Do you trust it? Is it in trouble? It depends who you listen to. But I got to tell you, I made my career in media. It was very good to me. And I left in 2022. I started to exit in 2018, but that's another story. But media has changed from when I was 17 years old and started lugging a camera to try and get into the business to what it is today. I don't need to tell you that. So tonight, we're going to explore media's mad scramble for trust and for cash. And although you're hearing a lot of people say media is dead, you may want to reconsider that. We're going to be looking at why there's 171 billion reasons. That's how much advertisers will spend in 2025 on media. $171 billion on why media isn't quite as dead as you might believe. To help me move this discussion along, I want to bring into the discussion right now Ken Rosato. Now, Ken, a lot of you in the New York City area will know Ken as a former anchor at WABC. He's now on WOR Radio as well as Salem News. And he has his own morning live stream with ONNJ.com on New Jersey every morning. That is growing fast. He's part of what we'd call new media digital, not legacy media or old school dinosaurs like me, but he is in the streaming world. And our other guest tonight, Karith Foster, who, just so you know, I first met Karith Foster when I was at Fox News and Fox Business. Karith and I used to do Talkenomics at Fox. We had a segment called Uncomfortable Conversations where we talked about race. She is a self-made woman. She was in media and she realized a long time ago not to drink the Kool-Aid. She'll talk about that. She is also the founder of INVERSITY.com. I got that right, Karith, right? Great. It's INVERSITY Solutions, and also the author of You Can Be Perfect or You Can Buy Happy. I want to make sure your audio is up. Do we have Karith's audio? Karith, say hello.
Hello. Can you hear me?
I've got you. I do have you. All right. So I want to talk with both of you about, because you have varied media experiences, I want to talk with you about what's going on first with trust in media, because it really pains me to see how few people trust media. And Karith, I'm going to go first to Ken, because I used to be on the street with Ken in New York City when I was at Channel 4 and he was at Channel 7. He spent 20 years on the street and then behind the anchor desk. Why do people no longer trust media, whether it's local or national?
I think a lot of it, and by the way, hello, and it's good to see you, my friend, all the years we've known each other. It's nice to be on with you. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that media, especially in a particular urban center like a New York City media center, okay? I think what tends to happen is there's a kind of a groupthink mentality. All of the on-air people know each other. They hang out together oftentimes. They socialize together. And there is sort of a common political bend that they all have. We like to say that there's the Upper West Side mentality, and that's because Channel 7 happened to be there on the Upper West Side, and all the other stations are somewhat near there. And I think part of the problem is the idea of being totally impartial and open-minded goes away. There's sort of an ego factor that comes into play with the attitude that we know best, everybody else is a country dolt idiot, and we have to teach them what's what. And I think everybody got their asses handed to them this past election, if you will, when everybody literally bought the Kool-Aid. I don't care which side of the fence you're on, because there's silliness on both sides. And let's just say that there really is, okay? But the people who were in the media, who stood there and said, oh, Joe Biden, sharp as a tack, wide awake. This is the most on it. Don't look me in the eye, as Judge Judy says, don't pee on my leg and call it rain. And that's exactly what it was. And I think that was literally the jump the shark moment when America said, you people are full of crap. You're full of crap. Why should we believe you? You sold us on Joe Biden for 6, 9, 10 months. He was great. And it turns out he was practically brain dead. And I think that's what gave people a lot of disillusionment. Look at MSNBC's numbers went from here to here, literally even before the election.
Yeah, but they've started to recover. But I've got to bring Karith into this because, and I should warn you, Ken, she's a comedian at heart, has had a successful career doing that. But how do you top what he just said? It really does seem like people lost faith because of the crowd.
I'll piggyback on what Ken said and say that not only was the election a complete farce, because 70 to 80% of us are in what Paul Conte calls the League of Reasonable Voters. And so when we're hearing this ridiculous rhetoric from both sides, opposing sides, that's just so extreme, we're like, that's absolute insanity, and that's not where I am. I will also say, though, that it started even before this election cycle. I think it's like it really came down to bare bones in 2020 with COVID. I think there are a lot of people who became very, whatever the opposite of enamored is, with media when they were being told. I mean, it was military grade psychological warfare of, if you don't do this, you don't get to participate in life. When we didn't have full information yet, and again, people are entitled to make their own decisions. I'm probably a liberal, meaning like I believe in freedom, right? You should be able to free to choose what you do to your body, in any respect. And when there was messages of if you don't do this, you're a horrible, evil person, then people are like, that doesn't jive with who I am and what I believe in. Why are you telling me this?
I'm going to share with you one of the last things I did when I was in traditional media. I was at Yahoo Finance, and I was able to land an interview with President Trump. He was no longer in office, but this was 2021. And I was told by management I could not refer to him as president, because the protocol was not to refer to a person out of office as president. So I actually pulled video of people at CBS, ABC, NBC from YouTube showing every reporter referring to previous presidents as president. And I said, I think I'm going to refer to him as president. But that was what I faced. And I'm wondering, Karith, I'll go to you. Does it come from management on high? I used to say there was no agenda. And when I was at Fox, I got accused by friends of there being an agenda. But I will tell you, he had some issues, Roger Ailes, but he used to tell us, the reporting staff, not the entertainment side, report the news, don't spin it. Does it come from management? Do they get that message these days?
I'm not an insider enough to say that. I think what Ken said is right on. There is this blanket mentality of we're superior, and our beliefs are what we're going to perpetrate and pass on to the world because we're the experts. And I think that's why I fell in love with media when I was a little girl. I mean, my biggest crushes were Tom Brokaw and Peter Jennings, and I had a girl crush on Connie Chung. I thought they were the smartest, most wonderful people in the world, and I wanted to be like them. I wanted to be this beacon of light and truth and impart information to help make the world a better place. And then when I got into it and I saw what was happening behind the scenes, I was heartbroken.
Let me go local, and especially with you, Ken, because your experience is so rich with local. I felt like I had a bigger impact at local because you could connect with people. Cleveland was the best local market in which I ever worked. I loved working in New York, but in Cleveland, it was a much different story. Local news has lost a lot of trust, but it seems like people in the local community still trust local more than other media. Why?
I agree with that. And I think it's because of the fact that you're speaking the language of the individual on the street. In terms of you're referencing places that they're familiar with, you're talking about personalities that they may have encountered, whereas when you're on national, it's a whole different story. And I now do both, right? So I'm on Salem News Channel, which is national. And when I write my pieces for Salem, it's one whole mindset. And when I write my things for my show is New Jersey. It's on a New Jersey top to bottom, from Rockland County, New York, down to Vineland and south of Philly. So we have to be New Jersey focused, and that's what we pay attention to. And I think that's why people tend to have that sense of credit, or people local tend to have more of a credibility among the locals because of that. And I think also, and boy, oh boy, do I agree with my comrade here, the two of us. Hearing everything you just said, I'm nodding approvingly. Connie Chung was one of my favorites too. Can I give you a 5-second quick aside of a stupid thing that I did? Okay, so when I was 14 years old, I was at Regis High School in Manhattan, and I was an intern at then Channel 9, which was in Times Square. Mm-hmm. And I remember there was a woman named, Elna Seabrooks. Elna Seabrooks. She was an anchor They used to do like news updates literally sitting on a tabletop desk because they couldn't afford like a real set. That was Channel 9 back then. So this had to be 1985. You weren't born yet, Adam. And so Elna wanted to meet me in Grand Central for a cup of coffee. I'm 14 years old. And I remember meeting her under the big clock, and I'm all excited. I'm in Grand Central. And she has a beautiful Asian lady next to her. And she says, let me introduce you to my friend. And I said, please, you don't have to introduce me. It's Katie Tong. And it was Connie Chung. And I was never more embarrassed in my life because there's the, oh, we all look alike kind of a thing, right? Now, in fairness, here's the funniest thing. I would later get to know both of them. And I was told that they were raised, are they from Cleveland or Cincinnati? I'm forgetting which. They're both from Ohio.
I think Cincinnati, because I don't ever recall hearing Connie Chung from Cleveland.
They were raised literally right down the street from each other. They know each other from childhood. And so, and they said that as they were coming up in the business, they would get confused all the time because it was on the East Coast, at least, we just didn't have that many Asian people represented on the air. And that's a shame. But they both happened to get on the air, one network, one local, at about the same time. And they were both getting that constantly. So now my guilt, of course, was assuaged a little bit. But nonetheless, that's my quick Connie Chung story, only because you mentioned it.
Let me, I want to go back to Karith, because with INVERSITY Solutions, the business that you founded, as you speak to people nationwide, do they ever bring up whether they're reading news, well, they're not reading newspapers, but whether they're even watching news, whether it be national or local, because we know they're all in trouble?
Well, I'm kind of the bad guy because I discourage people from watching the news now.
Okay. Well, we should let people know, as you said, you were in love with, news, and you had a brief
I was
The
in
View.
love, and I had my heart broken by the media. Well, here's the thing, and what I ask people to do, I challenge and I charge people to, don't just read the headlines, right? Go to the 7th and the 8th page of the paper. Don't just watch one network. See what everybody's saying. Because, yes, there is news happening around us, but I also, just for our mental health's sake, if you were enraptured all the time watching just tragedy after tragedy and there is a mentality of, we got to keep you hooked. So we're going to keep, giving you the stuff that, feeds your echo chamber, but also keeps you terrified. So you have to see what's coming next. That's terrible for our personal wellness and mental health.
Let me just ask you both a very quick yes or no. Do you trust, I'm just going to do it generically, the media? Ken?
Depending on what you mean by trust. I'm sorry about that. I can't give you a yes or no on that. Do I trust them in general? Trust but verify. How about that?
Okay. Karith?
I concur. So you know what? I think another thing that happened, and I'm sure you both have seen this, but there was a video that went viral of local TV stations, right, with anchors saying the exact same script.
Yes.
My friend was
that was Sinclair. I think that was Sinclair.
Yes, it was. It was.
Yeah. And so people are like, wait a second, this isn't original. This is somebody's feeding this. This is coming from somewhere, the top somewhere. Nobody knows exactly who somewhere, but like, how are we supposed to believe now what comes out of our anchors' mouths?
We're going to get to the business and what's happening, the $171 billion that's going to be spent. Half of it's going to go to old legacy media, by the way. We'll get to that in the next block, but I want to bring in somebody. I worked with this guy years ago, John St. John. He's joining us from an airport, but bless him for being here because he understands media. And I was curious, John, we don't have to get into the history of where we used to work unless you want to, but do you trust what you see in media these days? And you're still working, but for yourself in media.
Yeah, I am. First of all, Adam, thank you for having me here. And also, it's great to see you again, because we've been forever. Do I trust the media now? No. And I'm looking at both sides of the coin. I'm looking both at the conservative side and the liberal side. And having worked both, and I'm a tech, all right? So I wasn't part of the editorial portion of it. In my opinion, it's the same pig with different color lipstick. They basically are saying the same thing, but in their own spin. And do I trust it? No. One of your guests saying, trust but verify. I totally agree with that. And I'm not in news anymore. I spent 35 years being a tech, 22 or 23 of it being in news, and it has changed over the years. I started, I think, in the 90s and during the Clinton years, and then watched everything, and it's kind of gone downhill ever since. I mean, we could blame Donald Trump all we want. I'm not a voter of Donald Trump, even though I'm a Republican, but at the same time, it's like I've been seeing this slippery slope go by, and it seems like we're almost at a point of no return.
And either of you want to take a comment to what John just said?
I mean, I go ahead,
Go.
Kev.
Well, I was just going to say, it's not that I don't. I believe that people who go into news do so because in their heart of hearts, they are virtuous. They want to do a good job. They want to get information out. Are they always allowed to do that? I know that they're not.
Okay. So, John, it's great to see you. Have a safe trip home with all the FAA issues these days. And I hope to catch up with you soon. I'm going to throw to a soundbite. I interviewed somebody who covers media daily, and I've had conversations with Jason Barrett, barrettmedia.com. He covers the industry, radio, television, and music. And he has been watching. He and I have discussions about things are not dying, they're evolving. And so I asked him in this interview, okay, we're going to see consolidation. We know that. Would you buy? I'm going to use that soundbite and then go to break. And when we come back, we'll pick up the discussion about the business of media. But here is Jason Barrett from barrettmedia.com. If I were a venture capitalist and I approached you, or rather a private equity firm, and I said, hey, I've got a deal for you. We're going to make a bid. We're going to take over a Tegna or a Scripps or an Allen Media. But we need you to pony up, a couple $1 million to be a part of this, and you'll have a percentage. Would you take that deal?
No, I wouldn't spend a few $1 million on it. Not until first of all, I need to know what's the talent, what's the hit show, what's the return on investment for what I'm spending. Because look, some of the examples you gave there, the reason why I was quick to say no is I can't tell you which are hits. Like you come to me with saying, hey, do you want to be in business with Stephen A. Smith? Yes. You know why? I know he produces audience. I know wherever he moves, people are going to want to be part of that ecosystem. Colin Cowherd, you look in the news world, the Sean Hannitys of the world, the Tucker Carlsons, the Ben Shapiros, those guys have massive audiences. And so I don't care if it's a video show, a television show, a podcast, a written column. I know they know how to produce audience, which then leads to being able to monetize. If I am just buying your brand, and I don't know what your actual hits are that are going to move an audience to consume you regardless of the platform you're on, well, then that's a harder investment. I need to know that whatever you do, I'm going to be in good shape if I'm going to invest significant dollars in it.
Welcome back to Talkenomics. We are talking about media's mad scramble for trust and cash, and we're going to turn to the business side of this. I know we've got some people waiting to ask questions. Eric is on deck. We're going to get to him in just a second, but I want to start this, and let me start with a graph that I took a look at. BIA Advisory Services does analysis of what's going to happen with spending for advertising. And here's what's going to happen just in the United States, total TV. This graph came from eMarketer, but you can see that it has been declining. This is local and national, has been declining for a few years. This year, it's expected to be a total of $57.71 billion. Next year, it's expected to be flat, and then it starts to fall at $54.7 billion in 2027. Now, this is what BIA Advisory Services is telling us. Total media spend is going to be through the roof, 171 billion. But digital now surpasses total spending for what I'll call old or traditional media. That would be linear TV. The 89 billion, that includes digital TV. The 82 billion is over-the-air TV. And then when you break it up, 21 billion. This is what's important. 21 billion, especially if you want to buy stock. 21 billion is what will be spent on just local TV advertising, something like 250 TV stations across the country. So if you're looking at Tegna, if you're looking at Nexstar, if you're looking at Sinclair, if you're looking at Scripps, Hearst, all of the TV station chains, 21 billion, and it's shrinking. So let's talk about the money. Ken, is there enough money to keep local TV in business as we know it, or do you expect consolidation?
It depends on if you include local TV news or local TV. If you're talking local TV news, no, it can't exist the way it existed. And the few news operations that will exist in markets, you will have all one-man bands. You will have a few heads that do 20 jobs. There is no way the old newsroom of 100 people could ever exist on a local basis again. It's just not going to. The money isn't there. And I think that, in fact, I remember my general manager at WABC, and I'm sure he wouldn't mind me quoting him, Dave Davis, brilliant general manager. He told me 9 or 10 years ago that in 10 to 15 years, there will be at least 1 or 2 news operations in New York City that are going to fold. There's no way the money will be there for all of them. And already I see on all of the stations, as people leave, they're not being replaced. So I think that's the direction. You have TV stations in New York now doing MMJs, multimedia journalists. They have to do 20 things in order to get on the air because they just can't afford to pay an editor, a writer, a producer, a shooter.
When I was at Tegna up in Buffalo, we could not recruit because we were paying $42,000 to $45,000 a year for to try and get a kid coming out of school, $45,000 a year overnights to be a producer. Now, when we started, that was like wow. I mean, but we started back in the Stone Age. But they can make more money on a Monday through Friday shift at McDonald's. No kidding. That's just a fact.
Real.
So you have to have a passion for it. Karith, your book would be quite appropriate. You can be perfect or you can be happy, because a lot of people are leaving local media. But when I say local media, I mean local news, because they're not happy. In your experiences, because you've had to create not only your own business, but sustain yourself, what advice would you have for people who want to go into local news media, especially in this environment?
Well, obviously the message is follow your passion, but you also have to be smart about it, right? And if you have bills to pay, they won't cover the bills, as you were saying, you're going to have to supplement somehow. And I can only speak from the consumer side of things, but like I don't even have cable. I have 2 girls, 12 and 10, and they watch YouTube. They want so people are generating their own ecosystem of finances through social media, obviously TikTok, Instagram, getting sponsors that way. And I think that's where a lot of news people are going. Jessica Yellen, who I became friends with, she has her own thing going. You're doing your own thing. So I think that is in part the pursuit of happiness as well, because you get to do what you want to do and be your own boss and guide and create something.
So let's bring in, we've got Eric on deck. He's in the waiting room. Let's bring Eric in to ask a question about media. And I suspect that he understands media pretty well. Eric, you're on deck. The mic is yours.
Hey. Yeah, so I'm just definitely curious to hear from Ken and Karith, knowing that trust in the media is declining, what does it take to bring it back from audiences?
Karith,
you want to start, Karith?
I'll start. So I recently got turned on. I wish I could call her name so I could give her credit. But there's this beautiful Black woman with box braids who's a therapist. And she's giving like real deal therapy has been corrupted. Therapy is turning people into victims. It's not working the way it's supposed to. And it's so refreshing. And if we could do that in media, if we had the opportunity to say, look, this is what's really happening, I think people don't want to be pandered to any longer. We saw what happened with the last election. That is, I'm sorry, I'm independent, but that's what Kamala Harris did a ton. And I think it turned people's stomachs.
And I look, I'm a lifelong libertarian. There are so many things that, people assume I'm conservative on things, and some things I am conservative on, and other things. And Adam, over the years, you and I have had many a conversation. There are many things I'm extremely liberal on, and it all depends on what the topic. I think for media to gain any kind of credibility back, or at the very least, let's start with having both sides represented, and somewhere in the middle will be the truth. You can tell when somebody is spewing propaganda. And when every channel in a market has the same sounding slanted news, then that's why, I mean, not for anything, that's when you get the extremes of a Fox and an MSNBC. And people kind of line up on one side or the other and just shout at each other. And I think you need somebody to present both sides and respect both sides. I'm tired of hearing, and not for anything, in this case, I think it is coming a little more from the left than the right, the intolerance from the left saying that you are scum, you don't matter, therefore you don't even enter the sphere of the discussion. You cannot have any centrality if one side says the other doesn't even matter. And that is part of what I think caused such a huge backlash, and why a lot of people ended up I know independents and Democrats who voted for Trump because they didn't want to hear that. They don't want to be told you can't have a discussion with the other side. So I think that to get back to that neutrality is essential if they want to be considered credible.
I'm sorry.
Okay,
Can
no,
I just
Karith,
say
yeah, go.
that Ken is so right on, and this is why there's been this huge backlash about DEI. I mean, people are sick and tired of being told you're evil for being a straight white guy. Nobody can control what body they were born into. Like, we have got to come to a place where it's about respecting humanity. Now, I was canceled from speaking out of college because I used that term and was told by a very liberal school in California that that's actually racism. And that's like white people's version of like kind of masking everybody into one group, but it's really disguised racism. Like, we've gone so far over the edge that the pendulum now has swung to the extreme side where everything is, all these plane crashes are, well, it's a DEI hire. Well, okay, wait, slow the roll. Let's calm down. Let's be reasonable. Let's find a nice center place to operate from, and a respectful one where we can have conscious empathy and noble compassion and communication that is not filtered through just one lens.
Can I just throw, kudos to me in 2015. I did the expose on the FAA in 2015 when they threw out what had been the skills-based test for an emotional quotient test. We did that at Fox. It was called Trouble in the Skies. That's ancient history. But I do want to ask Eric a question. Do you watch TV news, or do you just get it from social media?
I actually do. And I was actually curious also here if anyone has any thoughts whether News Nation is doing anything right. I kind of feel like they're going out of the way to present both sides. They've got Leland Vittner. They're talking more from the center right. They have Chris Cuomo talking more from the left. I feel like, especially Leland Vittner has been doing a great job really putting things in perspective. When it comes to DEI, like you had mentioned, Karith, and the FAA, like, is this really the first thing to jump to? But I'm definitely curious to hear your thoughts on whether that's the right direction to go in.
Can I jump in on that? Only
Yes.
because I know I know a number of people there. I almost worked there myself. I agree with you 100%. And it's funny because it gives you an idea of how far to one side many of the people I know in New York have gone, that they consider, News Nation is just another right-wing Fox. It really is not. I've been in their editorial meetings. I've watched them say, no, we're doing this. We have to do that. They go so far out of their way to make sure there is a balance. And I thoroughly agree with our caller here, our video caller, that is, but if you don't agree with half the stories that they have, then they're doing a good job. That doesn't mean that they're just right wing if half their stories are right, because half their stories are left wing. That's the way it should be. That's called balance, and that's the way it used to be.
Karith?
Oh, I concur. I think people have gotten a little complacent, a little lazy, and we want to feel validated because there's so much uncertainty happening in the world. So people gravitate toward these echo chambers and kind of lose themselves. And this is why I'm saying it would be very refreshing to have people kind of call the public out on that. and say, look, you may not agree, but I'm here to lay down some facts. You may not like those facts, but some of them are indisputable. They are what they are. That doesn't mean you have to like it. Just like we don't all have to, get along and hold hands and sing kumbaya, but we do have to be respectful of our fellow human beings.
So let me be critical regarding News Nation. And Eric, I think that it's great that you watch them because you're probably the demo. I'm certainly aged out of the demo that they want. But here's the thing. I think it's great what they're doing. I think it would have been amazing in 1995, but it's 2025. How does News Nation get anyone to watch them when people are cutting the cord? I mean, I had difficulty finding them for a bit on YouTube TV until they finally got added. But how does anyone find them? Eric, how did you find them? Is it because you knew people who worked there?
Honestly, no. I just happened to stumble upon it. I was browsing through the channels that I have. I don't have traditional cable. I have what's called DirecTV Stream. So I am, sort of a cable cord cutter rather. But yeah, I stumbled upon it, and I really like what I heard. I felt that during the presidential debates and during the election, it was kind of the fairest coverage. Karith, to your point, I don't want to be spoon-fed just what I want to hear. I want to be challenged. I want to hear other points of view, and I really want to hear the truth.
Eric, it was great for you to join us. Thank you so much. I want to go back to Karith and Ken because I want to talk about the money. And for instance, News Nation, it's not cheap to put news on the air. The first show costs a lot. Everything else afterward is just gravy, essentially. But how do you make money in this environment, especially with social media pulling at everybody? Look, I doom scroll through Instagram. I get hooked, and the algorithm probably thinks I'm some kind of crazy person, but because I get some weird stuff. But how do you make money when, you got to compete with Instagram, TikTok, and all the other stuff?
I think if I can jump in here, I've actually talked to the management at News Nation and picked their brains about this, and the way they do it is you have to integrate. You have to have that all part of it. In fact, you know what News Nation does, which I think is brilliant, and I think Newsmax did this at one point too, if I'm correct, so I don't want to make it sound like this was News Nation's original idea. But what they do is they offer their correspondents free of charge to radio stations all over the country during morning drive to give updates on whatever big national story they're working on for the day. So the local station gets this national correspondent, so that's a big status, and at the same time they're promoting their channel. They get about 80 to 100,000 viewers on a nightly basis versus maybe 300,000 or 400,000 for CNN, and upwards of 2 to 3 million on Fox, because Fox is kind of the only game in town when it comes to the size of it. But I think you have to combine everything, and I know one of the ways they are making money until everybody cuts the cord, they get like $250 million a year just from subscription. And so any advertising they sell after that is gravy. But that, of course, will change.
Karith?
I was going to say subscription. I mean, if you can find your audience, which is, I mean, there's an art to that. I am listening to this new book a girlfriend turned me on. That's, oh gosh, what's it? I don't want to curse on your air, but
you can. It's streaming. We're allowed.
Oh gosh, what is it? It's Amanda something, and it's about being fucking rich, right? And she lovely young woman. She has the vocal fry though. Girls who talk like this. And so when I went to the store and I ordered my cappuccino, so if you can get over that, you can listen to the book, the audio version.
Yeah.
But she talked. I mean, she's a multi-millionaire. The woman is like in her early 30s, and she did it because she did get 2 degrees in ministry and in therapy. And she's a life coach, and she wanted to, increase her wealth. And she studied social media. She learned what to do to gain an audience. And so there is an art and a science to it. And if you can find people who know how to get in, and you have a good editor, and now with AI, love it or hate it, there are so many ways to generate clips automatically. And it's kind of like finding that sweet spot, right?
Yeah, I've been testing an AI editing tool. It's not public yet, but it will be very soon, called Arbor. And you can put the video in and then tell it, select me. I want a 15-second, I want a 30-second, I want a 60-second video. And it picks the sound bite. And then you can pick a distribution platform. You can there's one out there already that people are using, Opus, that does something similar. But we're going to continue the discussion after the break, talking about the money and where it's all headed, and then we'll wrap up. We have a quote that we want to share with you after the break as well. But Jason Barrett, again, who follows media through Barrett Media, I asked him about the business because I'm an old car nut. I used to restore Studebakers. My granddad had a junkyard in Portland, Maine. And the Studebaker Company, they were the largest vehicle producer in the 1800s, early 1900s. Cars came in. They made horse-drawn carriages until 1920. They shut down the horse-drawn carriage division in 1920, and it was still profitable. And I share that because that seems to be what's happening with old-fashioned linear TV. It's still incredibly profitable. So I asked Jason Barrett, is the business dying? And here's what he said. So I get that the money is shifting to digital, and that includes digital TV. But why would anybody buy over-the-air advertising on TV now? I guess it'd be the same as over-the-air advertising on radio.
It depends on what it is you're buying. Like, does anybody think there's not value in buying an ad in the Super Bowl? I would tell you there's value in buying the Super Bowl. Now, if you bought the first round of the playoffs, maybe not. You don't remember any spot that ran during an NFL playoff game week 1. But you know what? You were sitting there tracking the commercial during the Super Bowl. So there are certain premium events that still have value. I think where you're going is a lot of the programming that's on television, groups are probably getting good rates to buy at scale. And so they buy a bunch of things, give me the top shows on ESPN or Fox News or CNN, MSNBC, all the normal stuff. And so, sure, is there as much value in buying a spot inside of a show as there is in taking that same dollar, spending it on streaming, spending it on digital? Probably not. But to that point, there's still, the problem I have is when you see the way this is portrayed publicly, it's like television's dead, radio is dead, everything is dead except digital. I'm like, there's actually $15 million being spent on radio. I'm sorry it's not 20 billion like it used to be. Guess what? There's still a pretty healthy business there.
And welcome back to Talkenomics Live. I'm Adam Shapiro. We're streaming live to you from Brooklyn, New York, and we're talking about something dear to my heart because I do love the media industry. I made a very good career. It was very good to me. It was very good to our guests as well, but it is changing. And I want to bring our guests back in. We've got Karith Foster, who is the founder of INVERSITY Solutions. She's also the author of the book, You Can Be Perfect or You Can Be Happy. We've got Ken Rosato, who everybody in the tri-state area knows. Ken was on air in New York City for 2 decades. He was on the street, he was an anchor, he was a reporter's reporter, and the best anchors are those who actually had to cut their teeth reporting, and Ken is one of those people. He's still streaming news. You can watch him on WOR Radio as well as Salem News, and of course every morning on ONNJ.com on New Jersey with Ken Rosato mornings. But I want to bring in a question that one of our viewers has put up on YouTube, and here it is. Betsy is asking, if the media industry is changing and there's a general lack of trust in it by the public, what guidance would you give young people who want to be a reporter or producer or camera person? Karith, you go first, because you started in media, you had that experience at The View, and you said, I'm out of here.
I did. Listen, if it is your passion, you will find a way to make it happen. But you have to be true to yourself along the way. I got my degree in broadcast journalism from an amazing women's college in Columbia, Missouri. I studied abroad at Oxford. I worked at a local TV station, KMIZ, with Savannah Guthrie, actually years ago. Moved to New York to work as part of the production staff for The View. And there was just something that didn't sit right with my soul. And I still wanted to be able to tell the truth and be this beacon of light and information. And I went into stand-up comedy. So maybe, media is your calling, but maybe there's another way. There's written journalism still. You can have your own blog. You can be a personality now on your own channel. And by the way, I have the title of the book. It's Rich as Fuck. More Money Than You Know What to Do With. And it's by Amanda Francis.
I'm getting that right now. I'm going to download it if I can. That's super.
Get it, kid.
I have to, when we
Love it.
post this again on YouTube, I have to check the not made for children side. It's okay. Last week's guest was dropping F-bombs right and left, Karith. It's all good. Ken, what about you? How would you answer Betsy's question?
You know what? I think part of my issue is, there was an era in the 70s, 80s where a lot of kids were coming out of J school and they had this idea that we're going to get into journalism to change the world. No, the word journalism or journal comes from the French word diurnus, or the Latin diurnus, and becomes jour in French. It means to chronicle the day. That's your job. So if you went from point A to point B, a journalist says, I went from point A to point B. Not, I got up and boy, point A looks like a piece of crap, and then point B is gorgeous. That's not your job. You can describe it as it was orange, it was green, but once you get into judgment, that's when you're propagandizing. And I think that's when you have to be careful, because let the viewer decide. Present the information, let the viewer decide. You will be more successful that way. I pride myself on the fact that I was at Channel 5, Channel 55, Channel 7, 25, 30 years in New York. And the one thing that I used to get all the time on social media, I used to get, God, you're such a damn liberal. God, you're such a damn conservative. God, you're such a damn liberal. I was so proud of that. Nobody knew where the hell I stood. That's the way it should be. And I hope if I could impart anything, that's what I want to impart.
I saved my first hate letter from when I was in Indianapolis,
That was
Indiana, as a reporter. No, it wasn't. Trust me. But I had, it's funny you talk about that, because I had a source in Indianapolis who was a member of the KKK. And, they're going to march. And it's a long story. But I asked him at one point, it's like, why are you talking to me? And he's like, well, I trust you. And I thought, that's really interesting. He trusts me.
Can I ask you both a question?
Yeah.
How do we get back to what Ken just said when we are in a day and age now in the 2020s where everybody thinks their opinion matters?
Oh, can I answer that question?
Please.
It doesn't. My opinion does not matter. I learned that the hard way in a lot of ways. Look, the beauty of the old media model is that you made a lot of stupid mistakes in small markets, Sarasota, Florida, Indianapolis, Indiana, not so small. But I made a lot of stupid mistakes, and I learned from them. And I learned that people don't need me to tell them what to do. They need me to give them information so they can decide. There was a reporter, an editor at the Niles Ledger in Michigan, just above South Bend, Indiana. And Danny Dean, I don't even know if he's alive. And he pulled me aside. He said, Adam, remember one thing as you build your career. The American people will always forgive a mistake as long as you're humble. And I had to eat a lot of humble pie because I made a lot of stupid mistakes. Ken?
That's great. Well, you know what? Boom. That's a great. I don't know if you saw me pointing when you said, they don't care about that. They don't want to hear your opinion. You're right. They're tuning into news to hear the news. They're not tuning in to see what spin Ken Rosato has, or Adam, or whatever. I mean, look, people can confuse a Sean Hannity with a news anchor. When people say that Fox, that Sean, he's so conservative. Right. He is not a news anchor. He is a commentator. It's a commentary show. It's his opinion. Okay.
Thank you.
Right. So, and the same thing on MSNBC. In the day when they're doing news, it's one thing. At night when they have their opinion shows, that's another. And it's for your entertainment. That's if you want to get your little sounding board, that's where you go. But otherwise they don't really care. In fact, you remember the great Chauncey Howell? Does anybody remember Chauncey Howell?
No.
All right. So Chauncey Howell was this really quirky guy. He's deceased now. Great man. He worked both at Channel 7 and Channel 4 in New York. He used to wear a little bow tie. His thing was he would take a camera crew with no assignment, walk into a store or a restaurant, and just walk up to a stranger and make it all about the stranger. And just let the stranger tell the story. He would ask these weird questions and have these strange camera angles. But because it was, in a sense, it was about him, but it wasn't about him. He made it about him because he was so creative without having to say, this is my opinion. You get it?
Yeah.
That's a clever way of putting your input or your spin without telling
Well,
somebody what they should think.
But Karith, though, getting back to the young people coming in, especially with Betsy's question, I remember at Yahoo right before I left, there was a young woman who actually sought me out. She needed a mentor. That was chutzpah. I thought it was great. And I said, you're going to make it. Because out of the blue, she contacted me and we developed a friendship. I never met her in person because it was during the COVID pandemic. But I asked her at one point, because I realized, why do you want to go into journalism? What is it you want? She said, first she said, I want to change the world, to which I said, then you should be a lawyer. That's how you change the world. But then she said, but I might also want to be an influencer. And I said, well, if you want to be an influencer, that's fine. But if you're going to be a reporter, you got to stand back from that influence challenge. Now, I had to learn that lesson the hard way with pie in my face in Sarasota.
I'm going to play devil's advocate here because I have another spin on what's happening with the younger generation. My girls are Gen Alpha and Gen Z, just on the border. And when I speak at colleges and universities, I think they're also Gen Z, right? But some of them they're so overwhelmed, right, with what is out there, the choices. I mean, Ken, I love you for saying that I wasn't born in '85, but I grew up with 3 channels. Okay, I remember when there was only 3 channels, and there are kids now and kids in college who are like, I want somebody to tell me what to do, what to think, what to eat, what to wear, because they're just so overwhelmed by all the options, all the choices, which never existed when we were coming up.
That's a really good point. That's a really, really, I mean, we have 1,000 channels on cable and satellite, at 999 of which most people would never even watch, right? And you have so many choices between YouTube and everything else. It is overwhelming. But I would imagine what social media must be doing to young kids' minds, the influence, the bullying. I mean, they do have a lot on their plate that I didn't have certainly as a kid.
I wanted, Karith, watch Ken's reaction when I throw this out. Many years ago, because Ken and I share South Florida, I grew up there even though the family's scattered from all over the place. There was an anchor woman I used to watch, Ann Bishop. She was the legend of South Florida news. And I remember I had to pick my mom up right after I had started my job as a photographer at Channel 40 in Sarasota, and I'm in Miami. And I picked my mom up at the hair salon, and there's Ann Bishop. And I walked up to Ann Bishop and I said, Ms. Bishop, I just want to let you know I am now in TV news, and watching you, growing up with you, and I think his name was Glenn Rinker, really impressed me. And her response was, and this was in the late 1980s, does anyone still do news? That was in the late 1980s. And that was coming from, that's considered the golden age of television news. Let me wrap up real quick. Before I ask the two of you for your closing thoughts, I just want to let people know, coming up on Talkenomics next week, we have Stephen Dubner. He is the author of Freakonomics and the host of the podcast Freakonomics. So Stephen Dubner's here. You're going to want to ask him questions. And then in 2 weeks, I got Charlie Gasparino coming to Talkenomics. So the famous reporter. But Karith, real quick, parting thought before we let you go, and then Ken, you finish it out.
Well, first of all, I just have thoroughly enjoyed myself. I watched you when I was in New York. I'm in and out every now and then, but I came up watching you, and so this is a real treat for me. And I love you, Adam. But my parting thought is just for people to have discernment, right? And to go back to critical thinking when they're taking information in, because there is a lot out there. And you have to vet people, and you have to vet information. And sometimes if something doesn't feel right, investigate further on your own.
Ken?
And Karith, I adored working with you here tonight. That was great. And thank you for the kind words. And I would just say that that there is life outside of TV news. All right. And I think toward the end of my time at Channel 7, there was this identity, because when you're at one place for 20 years, you identify yourself with that place. And you can't even imagine. Yeah, I just thought I would die, after 50 years at Channel 7, whatever. But you know what? If I wasn't let go, and I was let go, I was terminated, but everything is good. I have no hard feelings, and they've been very nice to me over those years. Once I was let go, it kind of opened up my eyes, and I realized there is life out there. And you know what? A lot of people in the industry are going to be let go in the next year or 2 or 5. It's just inevitable. and they need to look ahead and think of what to do. So what I can say is do what we're doing. I mean, stand-up comedy, you get to be the opinion person. You get to tell a story in a creative way and get the instant reaction that you don't get when you're doing TV. That must be amazing. I mean, God bless you, Karith, for that. And then the other thing I would say is, like, look what I'm doing. I'm doing a streaming channel, okay? Now, the streaming channel may only get 5,000 streams a day right now. It's not like Channel 7 would get 80,000. But you know what? It's my 5,000. And I get to sit. I am sitting in my home. This is my home, this studio. And I get the comfort and the independence and the freedom, and I don't have a boss screaming at me, and we're making money. It's great. So there is life after TV news, and there's still going to be an audience. It may not be 1 million, it may be 1,000, but there's still an audience out there for you who will listen to you deliver the news or give commentary or whatever you want to do, but just define what it is you're doing and be successful with it.
Last thing I get to say, I do admire our colleagues who are still at the local level and at the national level. These people work horrible hours. They get beat up by the management above them who keep failing up, and yet they still pull it off. And Karith, your point earlier, the majority of the people in media, whether it's at Fox, whether it's at MSNBC, the majority of the people that we used to work with are in it for the right reason. Yeah, people make mistakes, but they're in it for the right reason. We appreciate everybody watching us tonight on Talkenomics. We're going to post everything on the distribution streams, and you have a great evening.